At age 9, a teacher looked at me and said, "That's the boy with the broken brain," for the whole class. You know, and parents and adults have to be very careful because your external words become a child's internal words. Because every single time I did bad on a quiz, on a test, or not picked for a sports team, which was all the time, I would say, oh, because I have the broken brain. That became my internal conversation. And I always tell people when they come to me and they say, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I have a horrible memory. I always say, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. If you fight for your limitations, you argue for your limits, they're yours, right? And here's the thing, your brain is like a supercomputer and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you programmed your supercomputer not to. They say the two most powerful words in the English language are also the smallest, I am. Because whatever you put after that, complete that sentence with, is going to determine your destination, your destiny.
I'm so glad you're saying this because this is typically said by like, you know what I mean, by motivational people or inspiring people. Now we've got a brain person, science telling you this is a fact.
So your identity is this. So let's say at a simple level, let's say people want to change their behavior, they want to stop procrastinating.
Yes.
But their identity is, I'm a procrastinator.
Yes.
Ooh, that's going to be a tough one.
Yep.
They want to change a behavior like, oh, I want to stop smoking. But their identity is, I am a smoker. Wow, that's going to be a challenge, right? So here's the thing, the reason why I bring these distinctions up is because it takes the self-loathing or the judgment out of it, because you don't have to, if you're not good at something, you could say like, oh, you could address the level that's holding you back. Finally, below the level of behavior, and this is a big one, is a level of environment, because you could, the behavior is you want to stop smoking, but the environment is you're around a lot of smokers. Because it's not, here's the thing, the people you spend time with is the people you become. You know this, you teach this, because your mirror neurons are always imitating what's around you. And that's the thing. So I want to sensitize you to, because often the people that hold us back are the people that love us the most.
You nailed it.
You know, because you know why? They're like, oh, you're going to another event, you're listening to another podcast, why are you reading another book, spending all that money? And they have they can have good intentions. Right? Because ultimately people are doing things for, you know, generally I believe for good reasons.
Most people.
But they could be sincere, but they could be sincerely wrong.
Sincerely wrong, and I love the "I'm not this yet."
Right.
I also want to just repeat things that you say brilliant things one after the other, and so this idea that as a parent your external dialogue becomes your child's internal dialogue is just riveting. I mean, it's riveting, and it's also true, I think, of leaders and companies too. Your external dialogue about your company or about that individual can become their internal dialogue. So what you're saying matters so deeply. There
are 6 primary questions we learned in school. 5 W's and 1 H, right? Okay. Now watch this. The identity level answers the question of who. The beliefs and values answer the question of why. The capabilities answer the question of how you do it. The behavior is the what, and the environment answers the question of when and where. It is fully aligned. And so I feel like we have natural genius inside of us, and when this is aligned with this, when people talk about their mind and their body and their values and the habits, when they're all aligned, things happen naturally and they're not happen forced. And my goal for everybody who's watching and listening to this is that they're smarter than they think. It's just we weren't taught how to do these things. And when you're in congruence and in alignment, things happen. Your natural superpowers, if you will, come out organically and are not forced.
Boy, man, brother, that's so good. I'm processing all of this with you. They'll be mad at me if I don't ask you a tactical question.
Absolutely.
So can you give them, I'm going to get a couple more things, but thank you for taking the extra time. I'll get DMs and emails if I don't ask you.
That's
tactically
great.
Ask him a specific tactic to remember a name. So I have Max out.
Perfect.
Do you do an association when you remember someone's name?
I do. Okay. Really fast. I would say be suave. Be suave. I'll give you really quick. B is believe. Right? Believe you can, believe you can't. You're right. So stop the negative self-talk. Right? So that's obvious. The second thing is E is exercise. We already talked about the power of exercise. Practice. Because the bad news is it takes practice to learn someone's name. The good news, not as much as you think. Like I'm really good at names, but after practicing for a couple months, it's just become second nature. Right? Just like parking a car or learning how to type, you do it without thinking. The suave is this. S stands for say the name. When you meet somebody, you say their name back to them, right? Because you make sure you observe it correctly. The U is you use the name. Use it 3 or 4 times. We talk about that. The A is you ask about a name. This is really great, Ed, when you meet somebody whose name you haven't heard before.
Okay.
You meet someone named Afzal or Ridiger. What can you ask about a person's name? You already said this. You already said it's not travel, entrepreneurship. What's everyone's favorite subject? It's themselves. So what can you ask about a person's name? How do you spell it? Where's it from? Okay. What does it mean? I was doing this training at the country's largest life insurance company. 100 people in the room. The training director's name was Nankita. And I was like, in front of the whole group, I was like, that's a beautiful name. How do you spell it? Where's it from? What does it mean? She paused. I was like, Nankita, what does it mean? She looked at all her coworkers and she said it means graceful falling waters. And I was like, wow. And then her coworkers gave that kind of reaction, like a novelty. And I was like, wait a second, how long have you worked here? She was like, X amount of years. With these people, yeah, a lot of them are good friends or at my wedding. I was like, out of the 100, I was like, raise your hand if you knew that's what her name meant. Out of 100 people, how many people raised their hand? Zero.
Wow.
Zero. And talk about like caring, that became like a 10-year client, right? Because that's the power of a name. The emotion, right? Okay. So ask about a person's name. Okay. And then V in Be Suave stands for visualize. And here's a real tactical thing. Okay. We tend to be better with faces than names, right? Aren't you? You meet a lot of people,
sure,
right? People come and you meet somebody, you say to them, I remember your face, but I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say the opposite. You never go to someone, I remember your name, but I forgot your face. That wouldn't make any sense.
Yes.
But here's the reason why. For neurological, your visual cortex is a lot larger than other parts of your brain, so you tend to remember what you see. Okay. Now, if you tend to remember there's a Chinese proverb that goes, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. What I hear, I forget. I heard the name, I forgot the name. What I see, I remember. I saw the face, I'll remember the face. What I do, going back to practice and exercise, I understand. Okay. So if you tend to remember what you see, try seeing what you remember. So quick visual aid is this, play Pictionary. A person's name, for example, is Mark. Take a split second and put a check mark on their forehead. And you're like, Jim, that's so childish. Yeah. Who are the fastest learners on the planet? Children.
Yes.
How fast can they learn a musical instrument? How fast can they learn another language? Right? They're sponges. And part of how they remember names is they make fun of people. Like they go to somebody, you're like, they go to someone named Jason, and Jason the Basin, right? And all of a sudden, like Jason's in therapy for years, not knowing, because he was teeth. But that's how you learn. Banana, fana, faux fana. You learn through imagery, right? Okay. And they make fun. And so remember, more emotion too.
Yes.
Information, you forget, information combined with emotion. Okay. So person's name is Mary. Imagine you meet someone named Mary, handshake breaks. Imagine she's getting married or she's carrying 2 lambs under her arms. And here's the thing, it overcomes in business what I call the 6-second rule. Somebody tells you something important in a conversation or their name, you have 6 seconds to do something with it, otherwise what happens?
You lose it.
It's gone. Out of your working memory, short-term memory, it's gone.
Got it.
So this helps you to focus uniquely on both the person and also the name. So if a person's name, for example, is let's say Carol. Imagine they're singing Christmas carols.
Yes.
Right? A person's name is Mike. Imagine them jumping on the table and singing on a microphone for a split second. And then when you say goodbye to them 20 minutes later, you're like, oh, that guy was singing on the karaoke on the microphone. What's his name? Mike. Right? Because it glues it. And then, by the way, it's a short term, because once you know the person's name is Ed or Athena or Mike or whatever, what will happen is...
You just named everybody here.
Sorry.
So
Once you do that, then the pictures disappear because you know it. You just need something to glue it, because there's 3 parts to your memory. You encode the information, you store the information, then you retrieve the information. But most people can't retrieve it because they're not encoding in a way that makes it memorable.
Oh my gosh.
So you make it visual, you make it fun and interesting. So if a person's name is John, you can imagine whatever.
Yeah, right.
And then finally, that's the V. The E in Suave stands for end.
Okay.
You always end the conversation using their name, saying goodbye using their name. Because if you could walk into a room of strangers and leave saying goodbye to 20 strangers by name, who are they all going to remember? You. They're going to remember. And that's a standout skill. Because it's not just what you know. Yes, you can learn faster. It's not only who you know, but it's also who knows you.
Who knows you.
And who's going to remember you.
That's
a standout
awesome.
skill.
That is awesome. And the 6-second rule, if you don't use it, you lose it. So do something within the first seconds. That is brilliance.
There are a few obstacles to effective reading, so let's go through them really quickly. Number 1, what keeps you from reading slow is lack of education. You're not born with the ability to read. Nobody is. Right. And so we learned it through class, through a training, right? But when's the last time you took a class called a reading? How old were you?
Probably 6.
6 or 7 years old, right? Exactly. Right. So we are still, every single person watching this, for the most part, we're still reading like we're a 6 or 7-year-old.
Whoa.
Because that's the last time we had training in that one area, right? The difficulty, demand has increased tremendously, but we're still reading like a 6-year-old. So that's number 1, get the proper education. Lack of education. Number 2, lack of focus. We could all relate to this.
Yeah.
You read a page in a book, you get to the end, just forget what you just read.
Of course.
Because your attention is everywhere, your mind wanders. You're thinking about the dry cleaning, the clients, everything, the kids. So here's the thing. You just mentioned that if you read faster, you feel like you wouldn't retain as much and understand as much.
I know it's not true.
It's not. It's not, because we weren't taught differently, right? And so what I would say is, the fastest, so I think it's a myth being spread around by slow readers that if you read faster, you wouldn't understand as much, because it's a lie. And this is interesting, because we have online academy, right, of speed reading, and we have students in over 180 countries, so we have a lot of data. And we found the fastest readers actually have the best comprehension because they have the best focus.
Okay.
So here's it, this is a metaphor. Your brain is this incredible supercomputer, but when you read, you feed this supercomputer one word at a time. Metaphorically, you're starving your mind.
Okay.
Right, and even if we were to talk like that through this conversation, it would be like 8 days to
Right.
right? And what would happen to people very quickly if they were talking that slow? Their mind would wander, they would fall asleep, they would think about other things, they would just, and isn't that, aren't those the same exact things that happen when you read?
Yes.
Your mind wanders, you
Yes.
fall asleep, you start thinking about other things.
Yes.
Because if you don't give your brain the stimulus it needs, it'll seek entertainment elsewhere in the form of distraction.
Got it.
Third obstacle, this is the big one, subvocalization.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the big one. By far, we're talking about your inner voice. Subvocalization means, you ever notice when you're reading something, you hear the inner voice inside your head reading along with you? You hear that, hopefully it's your own voice, it's not like somebody else's voice. The reading why keeps you reading slow. The reason why is because if you have to say all the words to understand them, you can only read as fast as you could speak. And this is mind-blowing to me. Subvocalization, vocal speech, sub, like a submarine, inner speech. If you're saying the words to understand what you're reading, you're doing it not right. Because New York City, you don't have to say the word New York City or computer to understand what those, just like when you're driving, you see a stop sign, you don't say to yourself, stop. 95% of the words, do you understand what that stop sign means though? Yes. 95% of words are words you've seen before, you don't have to pronounce the words. You know, leaders are readers, right? You read a lot, Tony Robbins read a lot, you know, like Oprah reads a lot, Bill Gates reads a lot, like John F. Kennedy, you know, leaders are readers. He was a very fast reader. He was said to have read every morning 6 newspapers with 1 cup of coffee. Most people, it's the opposite. It takes like 6 cups of coffee to get through like a newspaper, right? And that's the challenge. But he's, you know, let's say, you know, he said to read 800 to 1,000 words a minute. But if he could talk at, the average talking to is about 200, 250 words per minute, there are like 700 words per minute he's not pronouncing, right? You don't have to pronounce words you've seen before, but that's how we were taught as a kid. Like a lot of what accelerated learning is, just like success, is unlearning. Bad habits. When you were a kid, you had to say the words out loud because the teacher needed to know you're pronouncing the words phonetically correctly. But later on, remember this? Your teacher said, read quietly to yourself, read silently to yourself. And that's when you took that external voice and you put it internal there, and it's been there ever since. Here's the point. When we listen to podcasts or audiobooks, how many people like to listen to it at 1.5 or 2x or 3x? And they can understand it too.
Yes.
You can't talk that fast though. And that's the thing, right? And so that's why subvocalization is saying, basically, if you're subvocalizing, your reading speed is limited to your talking speed, not your thinking speed. You can understand so much more, so much faster, but you can't talk that fast. It's a bad habit we picked up as a kid, so we did a whole podcast on how to reduce subvocalization, right? And or our programs, like over 21, 30 days, we teach people methodically how to do it, because there's a difference than a tip than a training.
Sure, of course.
Fourth obstacle, I would say, and then we go to solution, regression. It's a very bad habit we picked up as a kid. Regression is backskipping. You ever notice you read something, you go back and reread words, or you reread a whole line by accident?
Yes.
You know, upwards of 20, 25% of time can be spent rereading words. So how do you, now, I'm gonna give you just one tip on how to overcome this, which will make a big difference. This tip is gonna help you read 25 to 50% faster with better focus. Now that's a huge return, because like on average, our online program, 300% increase.
Hey, it's Ed Mylett. I just wanted to thank you for being here, and I would ask you to please subscribe to the show. If you just click the subscribe button here, I would really appreciate it. It helps the show grow so we can get even more successful guests on the program to help you. At the same time, if you're subscribed, you're going to get access to the programs before anybody else in the world gets access to them. So if you would, click subscribe right here. Thanks so much.
305-pound dude sitting on the beach, right? A lot of success financially, a lot of success with friends, socially, you know, your business. 305-pound dude, and by the way, how tall are you?
5'8".
5'8". So this is a big boy. And by the way, looked probably 20 years older at the time, if you look at the photos that we'll put up on the YouTube right now. For you to go, athlete, that is just ballsy as heck. For a 305-pound dude who's 5'8", who's already achieving in an industry, go, I'm going to redefine who I am, and I'm going to become Charlie Rocket, the athlete. I'm going to take control of that identity. That, to me, man, is like one of the coolest things I've ever heard. If we had a video camera of that dude, you'd go, athlete. The whole, 1 million out of a million people would reject that, right?
100.
So how do you do it? I want you to tell them about this one thing, and then, because I just think it's maybe one of my favorite things I've ever heard. You said that you had to change the algorithm for your life. Oh my gosh, is this good right here? So how did you make the shift, but please tell them about the algorithm piece of it.
So let's take, for instance, social media.
Yep.
Social media is going to feed us what we like, but it also knows to sample us candy. Candy is this thing that tastes good, it's colorful and vibrant, but if we eat too much of it, we get sick. But the thing with the algorithm is, if you like something, now I'm going to show you more of that.
Everybody understands that. If you like things on social media, the algorithm tells us to send you more of that same kind of stuff.
That's right.
Okay.
So another term for it is artificial intelligence. This is what you like, so let me build this whole world around you of things like that. And in my life, I was eating all this candy. It would be the wrong things on social media. It would be the wrong things on television. It would be the wrong things just with my friends. Everything was that I was consuming was sweet and beautiful, but it was making me sick.
Yes.
So what I had to do was I had to create a new algorithm for my life. And to create a new algorithm, it's like starting a new Instagram page. You got to get rid of everything. You got to unfollow everything. And you've got to now tell the computers, the artificial intelligence, that this is what I want you to bring into my life.
Feed me this stuff.
Feed me this. So I believe in the law of attraction. I study quantum physics. Me and Andy Frisella actually talked about it a lot on his podcast. Is creating the new algorithm for my life was law of attraction. Okay, I'm going to get rid of everything first and foremost. And I remember the conversation that I had with 2 Chainz when I told him I was going to retire. I said, I want to walk away from the business. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be an athlete.
They was thinking you're crazy.
He did.
Yeah, I mean, you almost can't blame them.
I said, my name is Charlie Rocket. I'm going to reinvent myself. I said, I have to create a life built around me, a business that's built around me that's going to save my life. Because right now I have a business built around me. All the algorithms around me are killing me. I have to reinvent. And the only way I can live is if I create an athlete business built around me. So everything I do, because I love business, I'm never going to not do business. So the only way to save my life is for me to be a professional athlete. How are you going to make money? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. I said, I'm going to do an Ironman in New Zealand in 10 months. I lost 130 pounds. I did that Ironman in New Zealand. I biked across America.
Yep.
And I said, I want to be a Nike athlete. That's how I'm going to be a professional athlete. If I can be a Nike athlete, I can actually make this thing work. And in Nike's mission statement, it reads, if you have a body, you are an athlete. And I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm meant for this company. And my very first stock that I bought when I was 8 years old was also Nike.
Okay.
It was like, I was so fascinated by the company. I loved Michael Jordan, I loved basketball, I loved everything sports. And Nike was a motivational, inspirational sports company. I like that. I'm going to be a Nike athlete. And that mission statement describes me, but none of their athletes are regular people. They're all these super high performance intense. And I'm like, I'm going to be the one who's that common man, regular athlete. And I said, well, I believe in the law of attraction. If I want to attract Nike into my life, well, what do Nike athletes have? They have commercials. I said, I need a commercial. I'm going to make a commercial. And I titled it the same thing when I was on that beach. I said, my story isn't over yet, comma. That was the name of that commercial. And I told my life story. And I got with a filmmaker, and it cost us like $1,500 to make. We had a PVC pipe that connected me to him, so the camera never moved. It was always the same distance from my legs every single time. And the background would change. And we made this music that had me breathing with my steps to the beat. And we just told the story. And we put it out. And 3 days later, Nike called me. And they said, we don't know who you are, but you have our entire campus in a frenzy. We have to get you up here. They flew me up to Beaverton, Oregon. And they said, we want to support you with everything you're doing. I'm just blown away. Like, I'm being treated like LeBron James at Nike. The best performing stock in the Dow 30 this year. They're paying attention to me. Fast forward a few months. I made a commercial called Dream Crazy. It was a fan-made Nike commercial called Insert Nike Logo Here. And I came up with this tagline about myself called Dream Crazy. I got a phone call a few weeks later. Nike said, we have a surprise for you. There's a big commercial we're working on with Colin Kaepernick, and we want you to be in it. And they titled that commercial Dream Crazy.
Come on, man.
The most culturally pivoting commercial maybe in history.
Ever. Yep.
And I was featured in that. And I remember that day 2 Chainz called me. He said, you stole my superpowers.
I love that, brother. Like, y'all that are hearing this, I know what you're thinking. You're going to be kidding me, man. So from sitting on the beach, 305 pounds, you end up in a daggum Nike commercial like this. Did you hear what he said, by the way? Lost 130, Nike commercial, biked across the United States, starting to reverse the brain tumor, by the way, and is doing Ironmans. Like, the thing that's powerful is the combination of this crazy dream crazy, but massive monster action. I can't stand when people tell me, I'm so on fire for my dream, I got this crazy dream. No action, or little action. You take massive monster freaking action.
I have a hack, I have a life hack for that.
Give it.
I have this philosophy where I say, everything's gonna be easy. Because usually when we go into something, we're like, oh man, it's gonna be hard, so we're gonna have to grind, and we're gonna have to grind. And I thought about it, I was like, grinding is like a lot of friction, and that's hard, and if it's too hard, I might not wanna do it. But if I say something's gonna be easy, I'm probably gonna show up. And I did that with my Ironman, and I do that with my businesses. With my Ironman, I was like, okay, Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a 26.2 mile run, a full marathon after doing all that other stuff. And I said to myself, give me an Ironman training program. And I looked at it, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Like this many laps at this intensity, heart rate at this, and then sprint for this. I was like, this is too much. I need something simple. How many hours a week do they work out? It said 14. I said, that's easy. 2 hours a day. When I was 8, we'd ride our bikes with our friends for a couple hours, or we'd go to the pool on the weekend for a couple hours, or we'll be running around the park for a couple hours. I'm gonna do this Ironman, I'm gonna train like an 8-year-old, and it's gonna be easy.
Wonderful.
That was my philosophy. That's what actually got me to show up and take the step, because if I kept saying it's gonna be hard, it's gonna be hard, it's gonna be hard. Or I could say it's gonna be easy, and in my mind, it's easy. Now, it took me, 16 hours and 41 minutes to do the Ironman, and I came in second to last place. But if you ask me today, it was easy.
Yeah, well, you're one of 1% of the humans on Earth, well, actually 1/10 of 1% who have actually completed an Ironman, and most of them start at 305 pounds when they're 5'8" and do it in about an 18-month window. Is bananas, right? And so I think what it is what you're saying is that no matter what you define it as, you're going to get what you're looking for. So if you think something's easy, you're probably going to find easier paths. What you did is you took a very complex thing, made it simple, because the enemy of executing is complexity. So you made it very simple. If you're looking for something that's going to be fun, or you tell yourself it's going to be rewarding, you tell yourself it's going to be all kinds of things, worth it, the worst thing you could tell yourself is that it's going to be hard or difficult or a grind. There's other ways to accept the fact that something is work and not call it hard or difficult. It can be rewarding, worth it, valuable. That'll be something I'm proud of when I'm done. There's all different ways to word it other than feeding yourself that horribly negative thought of how hard something or difficult or tragic. You meet people all the time like, I'm just getting through life. I'm overcoming. Life's not just about overcoming life. Life's to be embraced. If you're constantly overcoming things, you're going to find more things to overcome. There's always going to be adversity coming your way. And so it's super powerful.
And the reason that I'm covering this topic today is probably more than any other topic I've been getting asked lately about the struggles people are going through with self-doubt, not believing in themselves, negative thoughts about themselves. And I believe the solution to self-doubt is to build something bigger than that doubt, which is to build our self-confidence. And one thing to know about the fact that you doubt yourself is, one, I struggle with it as well. One of the reasons I've had to go learn to build all these tools for myself is because in my life, my baseball career, my academic career, my business career, my speaking career, I've been riddled with self-doubt. That creeps up all the time in our lives. Am I enough? Am I good enough? Do I deserve this? Is this something that's part of my destiny? Should I be doing this? And if you're a religious person, I believe the adversary, if you believe in the adversary, I believe the adversary's greatest tool that he could use against you to get you to lose in your life is to get you discouraged and doubting. These are two of the most chaotic things that the adversary can do to us, or that we do to ourselves in our own minds, is to get ourselves doubting, to get ourselves discouraged, because you can't win when you doubt and you can't win when you're discouraged. What I found out, though, about self-doubt is that you don't overcome it, you build something bigger than it, which means you build your self-confidence, and the greater and greater your self-confidence get, it minimizes the impact self-doubt has on us. Now, why is that so important? It's important because you have to understand one thing about the doubts and the negative thoughts you have about yourself. As hard as this is to accept, these are not your thoughts. You weren't born doubting. You weren't born discouraged. You weren't born thinking negative things about yourself. Those were thoughts that were placed in you and given to you by an external source at some time in your life. It could even be our parents. Don't do that. Be quiet. Sit down. Be a good boy. Be a good girl. Maybe it was criticism you received as a little one that you may not even remember to this day. It could have been a school teacher. It could have been ridicule at school from other children. But when you were young in your formative years, these negative thoughts about yourself were planted in you by an external source. That's so powerful to understand, because these things you think you believe about yourself that have become really true to you, you don't even really believe. They were not your original thoughts. But the power of belief is so incredible in our lives. It's so insidious, because when we have a belief about something, even if it was given to us by somebody else, our mind goes to work on proving to us that this belief is true. A belief is almost like this table right here, just the top once we get it. And what our mind tries to do is it tries to build legs under the table to reinforce that belief. So if somebody told you you weren't enough, or you weren't smart enough, or pretty enough, or fast enough, or strong enough, or you don't come from the right place, or you're not in the right culture, the right race, the right religion, the right height, the right IQ as a young person, or you were put down, and these beliefs were given to you, what happens is your mind tries to prove beliefs true, so it finds references. So once you think it, your mind finds an example of your life where you weren't enough, another one where you weren't enough, you weren't smart enough, you weren't pretty enough, you weren't handsome enough, you weren't strong enough. And it finds these references, and it builds like a leg, and multiple legs under a table, and pretty soon you can't move it. And it's stuck in there as a firm belief. That's why we have to guard our beliefs so preciously, because our mind goes to work on finding these legs, these references, which are real experiences in our life, to prove to us that that belief is true. And so although you may believe it to be true about you, these doubts and negative thoughts you have, these were not your original thoughts. That's a powerful thing to understand, because you weren't born this way. You weren't born doubting. You were born perfect. You were born believing you were going to do something great. You were born happy. You were born believing you were going to do something special with your life. As a baby, I promise you, you had no negative self-talk. You had no negative self-doubt. These are external sources. It's so important to know, because those thoughts aren't really who you are. They're somebody else's thoughts they gave you because of how they felt about themselves. And so today we're going to talk about how to build self-confidence and how to eliminate self-doubt. So how do we build this self-confidence? The process of building self-confidence is actually very easy. Believe it or not. Self-confidence is self-trust. Self-confidence is building a reputation with yourself, that you keep your word to you, that you keep the promises you make to you. When I meet somebody who has a ton of self-confidence, I don't look at that as somebody with a big ego. There's a difference. Somebody with self-confidence has a reputation with themselves that I do the things I say I'm going to do. That's where self-confidence comes from. When I meet someone who's not self-confident, I know this is someone who has consistently made promises to themselves they've not kept. They've started a diet and done it for a while but not kept it. They've made a commitment and goals to go make a certain amount of money in business, and they started down the road but then they didn't deliver on it long term, to get up at a certain time of the morning and then they don't do it. And so they have a process and a habit in their life more often than not of not keeping the promises they don't make to other people. They don't keep the promises they make to themselves. And so the cool thing is, self-confidence is an internal game. You do not need external accolades, external admiration in order to build self-confidence. You don't need any of those external forces. It's all done internally. You control this. And you control this by beginning today to keep the promises you make to yourself. And you have to stack the deck in your favor. Stack the game so you win. It's not good enough just to keep the promises you make to yourself. You must acknowledge it when you do it to you, to give yourself credit, to create confidence momentum, is what I call it. So whether that's setting the deck where you're going to get up a little bit earlier, you're going to make a certain amount of phone calls in your business, a certain amount of appointments, you're going to eat a certain amount of calories in your fitness, you're going to spend a certain amount of time with your children or your parents, and you begin to do these things you say you're going to do. You say simple things like, I'm going to lay out my clothes the night before I go to bed every night, before I go to sleep, so when I wake up that decision's made for me. And believe it or not, the fact that you just do something that simple that you then deliver on begins to build confidence. So you say, I'm going to stretch in the morning when I get up, and you do it. All of a sudden, I'm not going to check my phone for 30 minutes. All these habits I teach, when you just begin to do the things you tell yourself you're going to do, you begin to build self-confidence, which is this reputation with yourself. So ask yourself a question right now. What is one thing right now, one promise I can make to myself that I'm going to begin to keep starting this minute? And begin to do it. It could be how often I'm going to pick up a book and read it. But you begin to stack things you commit to do, and then you deliver on them and you acknowledge them to yourself. You're in the process of building self-confidence. Why is that so important? Of all the athletes I coach, when my athletes are performing at their peak level, they're at their highest self-confidence level. In fact, I love when I watch some of the athletes I coach get interviewed and they kind of do this aw shucks, humble routine in their post-game interviews. Yeah, just part of the team, I got to lie, could have done a lot better today. But inside, I know these people are incredibly self-confident people. Any of you athletes listening to this, you know this. The great athletes you know have incredible amounts of self-confidence. You have to believe in you when it's a battle, when you're a hitter against a pitcher, or when you're a quarterback against a defense, or you're a defenseman in the NHL against their best offensive player, or you're a golfer and you have to make a 9-foot putt to win a tournament, right? You better have self-confidence. In fact, the separator, more often than not at the highest level in sports, is not they're a better shooter or a better putter or throw the ball a little bit faster, because everybody throws hard in the major leagues nowadays, it seems, right? That separators their self-confidence. It's true in being a parent. It's true in being a business person. It's true in every area of our life. The separator at the top levels is self-confidence. So now you have that first thing that you're going to commit to, that you're going to deliver on. Now, what I would ask you to do, that now that you've done that, is if you really want to build self-confidence, can you begin to extend that list of 5, 8, and 10 things that you are going to begin to do, that you commit to you, that you're going to do every single day to begin to stock that self-confidence? That's going to change it. Now let's go back to the self-doubt for a second. Self-doubt is the inverse of that. I don't trust me. I don't think I'm good enough. These are thoughts placed from the outside inside your mind. The minute you acknowledge that, that's not my thought, that's someone else's. That's not, you begin to eliminate. I call it like scratching the CD. When I begin to have negative self-talk, negative thoughts, I literally picture, and I'm old by the way, but I picture an old record player or a DVD, and I just scratch it. I scratch it. That thought gets scratched. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I'm not fast enough, strong enough. I'm not prepared enough. Once they enter, that's not my thought. That's something someone gave me when I was a kid, and I scratch it. And I literally say to myself, scratch it, scratch it, scratch it. And over time, it's like a DVD or a CD or a record player. Over time, that thought can't be played again in your recorder when you scratch it enough times. So I literally picture scratching it and I say scratch it. I experience self-doubt, I experience negative thoughts, and I scratch them. I scratch them. I scratch them. And over time, it almost becomes funny. It's that thought's impact on me starts to be minimized over time every time I scratch it. I picture scratching it like a DVD or a record or a CD, and I say say it to myself. Scratch it, scratch it, scratch it. And what it does is it acknowledges the thought. It loses its power over me. The first time it still got some impact on me. The second time it might. But the fourth, fifth, seventh time, all of a sudden that thought just doesn't have the impact on me anymore because I acknowledge it's not mine. I've scratched it. And over time, my mind just doesn't want to play that song anymore. Doesn't want to play that movie anymore. And so that's how I begin to eliminate those thoughts in my mind. I build up my self-confidence and I scratch my self-doubt. There's also this misconception from people that you are certain things, meaning some people have this misconception that I am what I possess. In other words, I am my possessions. And so they link their self-confidence to their possessions. And so they're constantly trying to acquire more and more possessions, thinking that's where they get their self-confidence from. That's how they're defined as a person. I am my possessions. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's a hollow way to try to gain self-confidence by possessing things. Nothing wrong with going for material possessions. I have all kinds of them. But I don't link my confidence to those possessions, nor am I deluded into thinking if I could just possess more things, then I'll feel better about myself. So this is a mistake. There's a flawed thought. Number one flawed thought, I am my possessions. Second flawed thought, I am my accomplishments. In other words, my self-confidence is only linked to what I accomplish. So because I haven't accomplished certain things, I don't have that certain title, that certain award, that certain recognition, I don't believe in myself. I'm riddled with self-doubt. I'm defined by my accomplishments. The difficult thing about that is now all your life you're going to have to accomplish more and more and more in order to feel self-confident and eliminate self-doubt. You are not your accomplishments. You are not your possessions. You are you. You are perfect. You are beautiful. You were born to do something great with your life. If you're a person of faith like me, you believe God made you in His image and likeness and wants you to do something great with your life, not that you are your possessions, not that you are your accomplishments. And this is the social media insidious influence it has in our lives. People think, I don't feel good about myself. I've got this self-doubt. The gateway to me feeling more self-confidence is if I could possess more things or if I could accomplish more things. Yes, having nice things will make you feel better about yourself. Yes, accomplishing things certainly is a reinforcement for self-confidence, but it's not the pathway to getting it. The pathway to getting it is doing something great with your life where you keep the promises you make to yourself and acknowledge this self-doubt, this self-thought, this negative talk isn't even mine. It was given to me when it was impossible for me to defend myself as a child, and maybe it even happened in adolescence, and probably some of those incidences have happened for you as an adult. And these ones as an adult are like that thing I said earlier. Oh, it's another time I reinforced the table. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not prepared enough. I'm not the right race. I'm not the right gender. I don't come from the right kind of family. I don't have the right education. And we find these references as adults to reinforce these self-doubting beliefs we were given by somebody else as a child. Flawed belief is that you are your possessions. You are your accomplishments. Third flawed belief, I am what other people say I am. Wrong. You are not what other people say you are, good or bad. I see too many people that if someone says something negative about them, they believe that's who they are. This is the flawed third belief. I am my possessions, I am my accomplishments, and you know what? Or I am what other people say I am. Let me be clear with you. You are not what other people tell you you are. It wasn't true when you were 18 months old, 5 years old, or 55 years old. You are not what other people say you are. So stop letting that dictate your self-confidence or fill you with self-doubt. And for the record, you are also not the good things people tell you you are all the time. Don't live for likes. Don't live for comments on your social media. Don't do things in your life just to solicit someone saying something great about you. It's a cheap, shallow, hollow way to try to gain self-esteem and self-confidence. It's fleeting, it's short-term, and it's needy. In fact, the fact that it is a necessity for you to get liked, to get people to say good things, to get comments on your social media, or to do so in your presence indicates a lack of self-esteem and self-confidence, because we know self-confidence is an internal game where we keep the promises we make to ourselves. The fourth type of flawed thinking is I am what I look like. In other words, if I don't look a certain way, like what the magazine says I should, or social media says I should, if I don't look like these people, I shouldn't have self-confidence. And that's ridiculous. I can tell you straightforwardly, you're beautiful as you are. Especially the ladies listening to this or watching this. The world is constantly trying to get you to believe you're not enough. You don't look right. You should lose this weight. You should gain this. This should be smaller. That should be bigger. Whatever it might be. They're constantly messaging women, you're not enough. You're not enough. You're not enough. You are what you look like. And this is true for men as well. Let me tell you straightforwardly, you are not what you look like. You are your soul. You are your spirit. You are your gifts. You are the contributions you make. You are your intentions. You are perfect as you are. That doesn't mean we don't want to look better. Doesn't mean we don't want to get into shape. But we want to do that to feel better about ourselves, not for the accolades from other people. We want to do that to feel healthier and stronger and be the ultimate version of ourselves. But by no means does that mean you're not perfect as you are. By no means does it mean you are defined by what you look like. You are not defined by what you look like. You are defined by the content of your character, the way you treat other people, and the difference you make in the world. So the 4 flawed thoughts that I see most right now is, I am my possessions. No, you're not. I am my accomplishments. No, you're not. I am what other people tell me I am and say I am, good or bad. No, you are not. And 4th, you are not what you look like. These are flawed beliefs that lead right to self-doubt and away from self-confidence. So, the things we need to do to change our self-confidence is A, keep the promises we make to ourselves, and B, very important, we must begin to give ourselves credit for those things when we deliver on them. I want you to remember this as well. There's a power to the way we use the 2 B's, our brain and our body. See, self-confidence can also be a state, a physical state. It's very difficult when you're moving your body, sitting up straight, breathing deeply, right? You're in that physical, strong state of being, right? Right after a workout, during a workout is when we feel our most confident because our body's at a peak state. One way to generate self-confidence is to move your body into a strong state of being. Move your body. Literally, movement creates confidence. If you think about some of the peak times of your life, whether that be the fun time you may be having with your partner physically, intimately, or laughter, or peak performance running, right? Or your great accomplishments. Yes, there's a commonality to the way our body is moving at that time. If you think about the times when you're the least confident, it's usually when you wake up in the morning, isn't it? It's the most down, the most fearful, the most anxiety, or before you go to bed at night. These are 2 times most people experience the most amount of self-doubt, is right before bed and right when they wake up. Isn't that interesting? One of the reasons is because of how we're moving. We're laying down, we're hunched over, our breathing is shallow, there's no physical movement whatsoever. This creates a state of self-doubt right before we sleep, right when we wake up. Or if you're just kind of depressed or sick, self-doubt starts to kick in, doesn't it, right? If you ever had an injury and you couldn't move like you'd like to, that stagnation of the body begins to create self-doubt and strips us of our self-confidence. So moving our body is a gateway to self-confidence. And then our brain as well. We have to take control of our thoughts. We have to scratch the negative ones when they come in and replace them with great ones. Now, I don't believe self-talk works all the time, but I believe saying, I am strong, I am good, I intend, I'm a good man, my intentions are pure, I'm a good person, I make a difference in the world, I'm kind, I'm gentle, I'm generous, I'm strong, I'm faithful. Beginning to repeat these thoughts to myself, and these words do generate self-confidence. I keep the promises I make to myself. I'm a man of my word. Begin to talk to yourself and think these thoughts. When you combine your brain and your body, you scratch the self-doubt. You lose those 4 stupid beliefs. I am my accomplishments. I am my possessions. I am what other people say I am, or I am what I look like. These are completely flawed beliefs. We scratch those. We scratch them. We understand the process of stacking self-confidence in our life. We know we are the content of our character. And lastly, give yourself some credit. Will you please? And I'm going to tell you where to give yourself credit. And that is in the area of your intentions. A lot of my confidence comes from the fact that I keep the promises I make to myself. I know my self-doubt are thoughts that were given to me when I couldn't even defend myself as a young little boy. I know that I'm not my accomplishments. I know I'm not my possessions. I know I'm not what I look like. And I know I'm not what other people say I am. I understand the process of building self-confidence. I scratch the negative thoughts in my life. But I can tell you this, the last place I get my confidence from is my faith and my intentions. See, I know I intend to do good. Not enough of you are giving yourself credit for your inherent goodness. And I mean this. You're special in that regard. You're perfect in that regard. Just ask yourself, what are your intentions? As an individual, as a man or a woman, do you intend to do good in the world? Do you intend to want to help people? Do you intend to be a light in people's lives? Do you intend to make a difference? Do you want to live a good life where you've helped change the world and change other people's lives? Have you ever just asked yourself that? Do you? Because if the answer to that is, I don't spend enough time thinking about how good my intentions are. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to do bad things. I don't want to take advantage of others. I really intend to do good. You know what? You need to give yourself more credit for the power of your intentions. There's a power in life of giving ourselves credit just for the intentions we have. Just ask yourself that. There's two types of people in life. There's the people who intend to do harm, to take advantage of people, to cheat, to cut corners, to cause hurt to others for what they think will be their own gain. Then there's people who want to be a light. They want to make a difference. They want to help. They want to contribute. They want to be somebody. They want to honor their God. They want to make a difference in the world, and their intentions are good. Too often in life, people with great intentions don't give themselves credit for how beautiful and wonderful those intentions are. And so today, just take this inventory of all the things that are wonderful about your intentions. And then just take an inventory of your faith. As a person of faith, I know that I'm favored. I know that God wants me to do good in the world. I know that I was made in His image and likeness. There's a power to that. There's a comfort to that. There's a confidence that comes from that. Kind of a swagger. See, people aren't smirking at me anymore. I'm smirking at them. See, I know I'm not what I look like. I know I'm not my possessions. I know I'm not my accomplishments. I'm not what other people say I am. I understand the keys of keeping the promises I make to myself. I understand scratching those limiting beliefs. I know I intend to do good. I don't always do good. I make mistakes all the time. I'm not a deity. I'm not a God. I'm a man. But I intend to do good. And my guess is, so do you. Start to give yourself a little credit just for your intentions. Know you're perfect as you are, and then begin to take these massive action steps. The final piece of the puzzle is this, is that you have to believe you deserve to win. And sometimes it's not just that we think we're good, but that we've done so much, we must be worthy of winning. See, there's this adage in life, good people in life won't take more from the table of life than they think they're worthy of and they deserve. See, in business sometimes, short term, we've all seen this, someone with bad intentions can get ahead short term. But you always reap what you sow. Karma is always a real thing. And eventually the people that take shortcuts, that cheat, that hurt other people, that have ill intent, the world, the universe, God sort of finds a way eventually to get them where they're supposed to be. But good people will never take more than they think they're worth, which is why the mandatory requirement for good people to win is they believe they deserve it. They believe they're worth winning. And sometimes it's not just who we are that we need to believe in, but what we've done in this sense. That sometimes you've got to outwork everybody, and you've got to be willing to do the things nobody else is willing to do, so you begin to convince yourself, man, I'm doing all the things everybody else is unwilling to do, so I deserve to get the results other people aren't going to get. I'm doing the things other people aren't willing to do. I'm paying a price that's so much greater than other people that I'm worth it, that I deserve to get results they don't deserve to get because I've been willing to do the things they've been unwilling to do. So the last piece is often self-confidence can just frankly come from outworking everybody and convincing ourselves, man, I've been doing the things nobody else is willing to do. I deserve to get the results nobody else deserves to get. And that's a shift in building self-confidence.
I read this blog you wrote. I think you might have wrote it a year ago, but you republished it recently, or at least it came out, about the elephant in the room. And when I was coming up in business, I had the good fortune of getting to know Jack Welch just a little bit. And one of Jack's big principles was candor, being candid with people. Could you share with everybody the story about when you were let go at your job, and then your philosophy about, you know, discussing the hard things in business and the elephant in the room? This is huge, everybody.
Yeah, you know, people have this false sense of wanting to preserve people's, not hurt somebody's feelings. Yeah. And you don't, what I've kind of learned is that you're never fooling anybody. And worse, when there's an employee who's not working out, and out of perhaps your sense of goodness, you're trying to make it work, or you don't want to hurt their feelings, or you go, this person, it's terrible for two big reasons. One is people aren't stupid and they can see that this person is not performing. And then they form the opinion about you. And they go, either Mark is stupid and he cannot tell that this person's a loser, or even worse, Mark is weak and he's afraid to do something about it. And wow, that has always kind of resonated with me when all of a sudden I realized how it backfires when you're afraid to take action. And there's so many examples of this. I mean, listen, we've all worked for companies before, and there's this classic thing when someone is not performing and they put them on would you call it a PIP, a performance improvement plan or something stupid like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I go, that is such cruel and unusual punishment. That we're going to do this kabuki theater for 6 months where I'm going to pretend that you're going to actually get good at your job and you're going to pretend you're going to go through with it. But both of us know you're going to get ultimately fired and all I'm doing is covering my ass. How much better it is to call the person in and say, Ed, it's not working out. You know it. I can know it. We all know this, but it's not because you're a bad person. It's because you're just not a good match for what we need right now. And let me help you find a great job. I'll give you the recommendations. I believe in you. Let's find something that works. God, that's just I mean, listen, the person's going to be shocked. It hurts to lose your job. I'm not saying it makes it easy, but when you look back on it, everyone feels better about there being honesty behind this whole approach.
I agree. And just so you know, this was born out of a situation where you lost your job and you basically talked your boss into letting you stay.
Yes, that's right.
How ridiculous.
Yeah, I said, I heard this stupid story that this is, years and years ago, but I'd heard that it's easier to get a job when you have a job. So I talked him into saying, let me stay for whatever it was, 2 months or whatever it was, the severance they were going to give me. And it was terrible because I was the walking dead. Everyone knew that I'd been fired, but we were all playing along with this ridiculous play acting. Yeah, and of course, I didn't use the time to get another job.
Yeah, what it does is it erodes your culture. When you don't have candor, when you keep people around that shouldn't be around, or at least move their butt to a different seat, it erodes the culture in your company, and you just don't perform at the level that you could. And business is millimeters, it's inches. These little things are the differentiation between having an exit someday or becoming a world-class company, or even you becoming a millionaire or multimillionaire and not. These little things that we're talking about here. The other one, though, that you speak very eloquently about, and I really love the way that you talk about this, is dealing with failure. So the more and more, as I get older as an entrepreneur and just observing humans, my son wants to become in one of my companies in the financial industry in sales. And Dad, do you think I'd do well? Because he's articulate and patient and hardworking. And I said, Max, yes, but here's my concern. Can you really deal with rejection and failure? Because ultimately, that's what takes people out most of the time. Yet it's talked about in the 10 things you should do, but to me, it may actually be the most important thing, is your ability to deal and how you process failure ultimately. And you speak about like 97.3% of all the tests you run were failures, but talk to everybody about this notion of failure and what it means. And someone like yourself, how you process what most people would call failure.
Yeah, it's funny because, I do a fair amount of work with entrepreneur programs, and I mentor entrepreneurs, and that question gets asked so often, and they put it a different way. They go, how do I know when to give up? How do you deal with failure? And it's always kind of been a strange question for me because I don't resonate with that. I don't really get it. And I've kind of realized, and this is not something that's corny, I don't think about failure as failure. And I've kind of only now realized in the last handful of years what's going on. Is that I never fall in love with the idea. I always fall in love with the problem. And when you fall in love with the problem, well, the problem never goes away. The problem never fails. The problem is always there. And then what happens is all these things which were your ideas, when they fail, who cares? It was just an idea that I was trying, and I've learned something from that idea, that each of these failures is a jumping off point to more exploration. Even when something goes totally wrong, well, at least now I can cross those 3 things off the list, and I've narrowed down the possible approaches I have, which actually might work. And for me, this is great. That's the fundamental reason that I'm so motivated and excited that I've gotten to spend my entire life as an entrepreneur. Not because it's worked out economically well for me, not because of any of the other things that go on. It's because every day it's this adventure of I've got this thing I'm trying to solve, and I get to come into work and I get to sit around the table with these smart people and try things. Wow. And wow, sometimes some of them really work. Most of the time they don't, but that's okay. That's what makes it fun. Yeah. And it's always been this positive spin.
Mark, were you this way before you were successful? Like this was a philosophy you've carried most of your life?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I started as an entrepreneur 40 years ago. And back then, I mean, there were entrepreneurs, but no one called it that, or no one talked about it. And there sure as hell weren't classes or business majors or Shark Tanks about it. You just were a person who was compulsively driven to see something which wasn't working and go, there's got to be a way to fix that.
Go to the problem solving thing for a second. I'm just curious, because if that's the thing you love doing, you know, I used to think there's a problem. What's the right and the wrong thing to do? And I don't feel that way anymore. Do you have a personal problem solving sort of philosophy that you would share with everybody? If that's so critical, if that's something you love doing, do you have a philosophy regarding that?
Oh, of course I do. And it's one of the things that's taken me a long time to learn. And I've learned that ideas don't count. They don't. I hear so many pitches. You know, I do a lot of angel investing. I work with entrepreneurs all over the world. They all want to pitch me their idea, and they're fun, and you listen. But the thing is, no idea, zero ideas end up turning into the companies that they become. The successful companies all are this winding path of one thing leads to another. Almost never, in fact, never do things that are successful lead directly from the idea they started with. And so what I've learned is that the key thing is you got to do it. That the more time you spend thinking about it, the more time you're wasting. That you're trying to envision, can I see around the corner? Can I figure it out? And even worse, entrepreneurs get these things stuck in their heads. And they're safe and they're warm and they can build them and they can make them into multinational corporations and they can imagine all the amazing things when everyone's using this app without spending the first moment figuring out how they're going to actually get the one person to use the app. And here's the trick. The one way is you just got to do it. You've got to say, I'm just going to start, and I'm going to start completely half-assed. And I know I'm going to stumble. It's not going to work. But by taking that first step, I'm going to start the process of learning what might work. Yeah. And what I've learned, my process is to break down all pride, to break down all sense that this is going to happen or work well, and just friggin' do it. And what's taken me a while is to get more and more comfortable with how crappy it can be and still be a learning experience. Yeah. And I've come to learn that this, in my opinion, is the skill that separates the great entrepreneurs from the mediocre ones, is not how good their ideas are, but how clever and creative they can be about figuring out ways to try their ideas quickly, simply, and cheaply. And I do not mean minimal viable product bullcrap, because that is still way too much effort. It's thought experiments, it's simple tests, it's ways of colliding your idea with reality as quickly as you can. Like the classic story, and listen, I'm getting wound up here, so you got to stop me if you need to. But the classic story is that when Reed Hastings and I were commuting to work, and we were brainstorming ideas for what I could sell on the internet. And we had a bunch of them, which I can share with you if we have time, but we had this idea for maybe we could do video rental by mail. And then that was a bad idea. But a few months later, we heard about the DVD. And all of a sudden, wow, this could unlock the old idea. Now, we did not go, cool, let's go to the office and write a business plan. We did not go, amazing, let's go put together a pitch deck. We said, let's figure out whether this is ridiculous or not. And we turned the car around in mid-commute and drove back down to our town where we lived and looked for a DVD, because it was a DVD business, and couldn't find one. So we said, let's just buy a used music CD.
Wow.
And we mailed that in a little pink gift envelope to Reed's house in Santa Cruz, and found out less than 24 hours later that this idea actually might work. Wow. Because the CD got to Reed in less than 24 hours for the price of a stamp. But we found that out within 24 hours of having the idea. that is the kind of thinking that I look for in entrepreneurs. That's the kind of way that I pursue.
You know, one of the things you said, I'll unpack something and then ask you about this. That's one thing. There's all this entrepreneur skills. You got to have a vision. You got to have a vision. You got to have a vision. And I think oftentimes I made this mistake. And I got so committed to my original vision that I was paralyzed and inflexible by it, rather than having the flexibility to evolve like what you've described here. It's a huge distinction for sure. And then the second thing I think I'd ask you is, my threshold for looking like an ass is really, you know what I'm saying? I think that's one of the traits. Like, I don't mind looking really stupid. And I think too many people, it's not just the low level message is, don't worry about what people think about you. That's low level. High level is, can you enjoy looking like a fool? Right. And that's would you not agree with that? Because that's ultimately what's going to happen for you to take the risks to do all these tests, do this evolution that you've described.
Of course, absolutely. And, it's like one of my lifelong challenges has been learning foreign languages. And I've concluded the key is you've got to be willing to sound like you're an 8-year-old, because if you're constantly just translating in your head, you never make that rapid connection. But startups are exactly the same way. You've got to make a fool of yourself.
How many do you speak?
I'm sorry?
How many do you speak now?
I speak 4 of them terribly. In other words, I think more
English,
for me.
I can tell you that.
Yeah, I do. English is okay, but for me, it's more the challenge of learning something rather than is perfecting it, because I get bored.
So there's this idea of being able to look like a fool that you talk so eloquently about. Then there's this other element that isn't discussed much, and I've heard you talk about it, that I relate to, which is that oftentimes trying to do something great, let's just call it being an entrepreneur, but it could be wanting to be a great athlete, want to be a great mother. It can be lonely, and I wonder if you ever felt that way on your journey. I think there's millions of people, that are going to be listening to this in their car on the treadmill right now, and they're feeling connected and they're getting inspiration and value. And then when this is over, they're back to feeling pretty alone. And I think an acceptance that that's actually an indicator you're on a good journey is something that you should all know. Do you agree with that? Did you ever feel alone and lonely as you were pursuing this? Because I think that's one of the emotional things you have to deal with as well.
I completely agree. And it's something that doesn't get taught, and it's something that isn't talked about. And it's such a shame, because it is the reality of being an entrepreneur. I mean, people, when they see entrepreneurs portrayed in the media, they're on Shark Tank and it's exciting, or they're pitching, or they're having the launch party when they watch the Social Network movie, whatever it is. But it's not like that. A lot of it is this overwhelming responsibility. I mean, I remember early at Netflix, we were probably only a year in, and things were not going well. We had this idea that everyone said will never work, turned out to be right, and we were really struggling. And I remember standing in the stairwell, just looking out at the parking lot and thinking, I'm responsible for all those car payments. I have to make this work. I have my friends and family who've invested. I have to make this work. I have this dream of making this company. I have to make this work. And it's on your shoulders, and you think about it all the time. And it's a very, very natural thing. But it's one of the reasons why they consider a 2-person founding team a more stable configuration. Doesn't mean you have to, but it certainly makes it easy. And one of the roles that I've kind of played over the last 15 years or so since I left Netflix was as a mentor, as a person that a CEO of a company could talk to who did not have an agenda. I wasn't their board who was their boss. I wasn't their employees, so they had to be careful what they communicated about. I was someone who understood the problem well enough who they could talk to about it. And that's a really, really rare thing. And it's something a lot of founders, including myself, have struggled with.
I see you being incredible at doing that. Even as we're talking now, I feel some of that for myself, and I'm grateful for it. And, I think one thing entrepreneurs need to know, by the way, people need to know, even if you're going to lead a family, is one of the things that comes with that is you will probably carry what I call the emotional load to a degree, maybe even more than you estimate. There's an emotional load you're going to carry that you need to be equipped for and prepared for the moments like you had in the stairwell, for the moments when you get back on that jet coming back from Dallas, for the moments when, inventory runs out or your order gets shipped the wrong way. These are all part of the emotional load, regardless of your business model. when someone quits that you depend on, if you're in the sales business, one of your top producers leave or a client account goes the other way, can you carry the emotional load? And so I hope everybody senses that. I like your approach because the space of personal development, I know you've worked mainly with athletes, but now you're working in the business space as well. You hear about this positive thinking thing. It's been something that I've never really preached myself, not because I don't think there's a value to thinking positively. I just haven't always felt like it's applicable for most people at the time you find them in. And that's one of the things about your message that I love. So talk for a second about, first off, maybe a little bit about your dad might be kind of interesting for people, how positive thinking entered your life. And then what you believe a little bit more about neutral thinking, if you'd start there.
Yes. So, I mean, look, I think, anybody that understands any type of business, in order to develop relationships with clients, you've got to create your value proposition. And I don't care what you do. When I was a school teacher, obviously if you're running a world financial company, if you're, no matter what you're doing. So how I would ultimately evolve the education and teaching, doesn't mean that core principles that have been around, since, Tacitus and Aristotle and obviously Abraham Lincoln and Norman Vincent Peale and Maxwell Maltz. And, obviously those have stood the test of time. So much of what we'll get to came out of an adaptation to a very unique population that will never listen to a podcast, will never seek self-help, is not going to Gary Vee, is not, it's just, they're not doing that. So but how I was raised, in the mid 70s, I was born. My dad, Bob Moad, was a high school teacher and coach in Washington State. So ultimately my whole life, I was raised by, peak performance educator, motivational architect, things, but really well-developed systems for the business world. So it was, every night at dinner, I got a seminar related to the core principles in and around peak performance.
But one of the things that you talk a lot about, and I know your dad's a big positive thinking person, and I think even you would categorize, you and I both, we respect positive thinking. We know there's a power to it. But what I didn't know is this sort of data you've gathered on the actual power of negative thinking and the impact negative thoughts have on us. And then even worse is maybe speaking them out loud. I cannot wait for people to hear what you're about to tell them about that. Listen close, everybody.
The first time I was diagnosed with cancer, the whole principles and everything that I was taught and I was learning became a lot more real to me. It wasn't some anecdotal field in my mind. Now my mind was an asset. I'd been a 2-sport college athlete at Occidental and other things. And as I would get into my 19, 20, 21, I learned to use my mind as an asset and a lot of the core principles I was taught. But a lot of the sports psychology principles, a lot of the principles that I'd been raised with, that I was my dad's process was increasing human effectiveness, unlocking your potential, and committed to quality. And I was teaching a lot of those concepts in the sports world. And I had, IMG Academy is famous for the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy, 1,000 high school athletes, $70,000 a year, many of the best athletes, Tiger, Serena, Jeter, top prospects. Well, I'm like 24, 25. And, by the time I'm 26, just because I'm there and there's only a handful of us, I'm working with the best players in the country. And then I'm, working with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I had to ultimately come with a message that was going to make sense. In sports, we estimate that the mindset's probably 3 to 5%, because physiologically, there's no bullshit. The truth. You have to be big, you have to be fast, you have to be strong, you have to be explosive, you have to have hands, but your mind is like a steering wheel. And a steering wheel, it might be a small part of a car, but it gets you where you need to go. And so, we started to realize that that the positive thinking message wasn't working, and we also needed more time. So I told Coach Saban after our first season, we can't intermittently teach this. We've got 4 or 5 of the best people in the world from Wall Street, clinical psychologists, myself on the self-esteem side, but let's build an architecture in the summer where we give them an alphabet and then we can build off the language. And one of the big things we taught them was that negative thinking works. And we gave them a lot of the data from 18% of your creativity. Your increase in errors, can go up by over 30%. It's a multiple of 4 to 7 times more powerful than its equivalent positivity. And then we had all sorts of not anecdotal data, but we had from the Mayo Clinic to the Cleveland Clinic, 83% of illnesses are facilitated, exacerbated, or started from negative thinking. And then what we started to learn was if we say things out loud, they're 10 times more powerful than if we think it. And if they're negative, they're a multiple of 4 to 7. So if I'm saying negative things out loud, I don't want to be here, I hate the heat, what's going on in our world right now, what's the circumstance, what's the situation, then I'm increasing the probability that what I don't want to have happen will happen by 40 to 70 times. The last point is the consumption of negativity. 3 minutes of news is an increase in 27% that will say we had a terrible day. So like if you're diagnosed with a sickness, the thoughts, they're inevitably there, right? But how you talk about it is always going to be in your control. And if you don't feel optimistic, then saying nothing is going to at least give your brain the best functionality to navigate forward, as opposed to the panic that you create by looking at the internet, by whatever, all those things. So
let's stay there for a minute. I want everyone to get this. This is one of the most important things ever said on my show, because it's simple. And when something's simple, complexity is the enemy of execution, everybody. So when you're trying to change your life, you're like, I'm down on my luck, I have these negative thoughts, my self-esteem's low, but you're going to go all the way to walking meditations as the first thing you're going to do. Yeah. That leap is too far. Too far. Let's just be clear about what you're saying, because we both work a lot with athletes. Athletes are such a great training ground for how business works. I want you to already said a couple things. I want to rehearse. It's only 3 to 5% of the separator. You got to be physical. In business, you still got to be skilled. You still got to have a great product. You still got to have a great business plan. But this 3 to 5% is the separator. And it's as basic to get to a decent level. Yes. It's as basic, guys, to get to a decent level as the thought of something negative is 4 to 7 times more powerful than the positive thought. But once you express it verbally, you're going to 40 to 70 times the power. Right. Stay with me on this, everybody. One of the things that surprised me, because I was an athlete, just like you, similar type of athlete, good but not great. Yep. College athlete, that I am surprised how many people, because I don't do it, I just didn't do it, they speak negatives out loud. It's just not something I've done in my life. It doesn't mean I'm better or worse than anybody, but my life started out, I started to be pretty successful. I'm convinced, because I was in this very small group of people, I don't think a lot of negative thoughts, but I very rarely say them out loud. And that magnifier, not having it in my life, has created a great deal of success, just that baseline. So the first part of the program, guys, we're going to give you some examples next, then we're going to give you a different way to think. But so far, you ought to be going, I have to stop saying negative things out loud. And then into my consumption, news, negative people, right? Yep. These things, I have to keep them out of my proximity. These are the baselines to be successful. And if you're all wondering, that's what you do with elite athletes. Athletes are the last people who buy into positive thinking stuff, just so you know. Because they deal with too much failure. So they know, you're 0 for 20, right? And you've K'd 11 times. Your inclination is not to be thinking positive, and they don't want to hear that from anybody around them, okay? So how do they turn it around? And I got to go to a baseball story with them. I want to give them 2 or 3 examples because they're unbelievable. I'm going to say this to you. I'm going to tell you that I'm a Red Sox fan first, okay? And 1986, I've cried like 3 times in my life, everybody. And one of the times I cried, I was in my own bedroom alone watching the World Series, watching my Red Sox, who had not won a World Series championship in a bazillion years. We're in the 9th inning. We've got a lead. Bob Stanley's on the mound. And our first baseman's a guy named Bill Buckner. The game's over. The game's so over, everybody, that the champagne is already in the Red Sox locker room. There are Mets players in their locker room taking their uniforms off to get ready to leave. They're not even in their uniforms anymore, some of them. And a guy named Bill Buckner boots a ground ball between his legs. Bless his heart, great player, like 10-time All-Star.
Yeah, 8-time Gold Glover.
Gold Glover, one of the best defensive players in the game at his position, borderline Hall of Fame, or like 2,800 hits or something like that, I think Buckner had. It's the cap on his career. He's our first baseman. And guys, he lets a slow ground ball go through his legs, and we ultimately end up losing that game and then losing the World Series. It's probably, bless his heart because he just passed away, but it's probably the biggest error in the history of a championship game ever made. And I cannot believe what you're going to tell them about what you discovered about Bill Buckner prior to this. So listen to this, everybody.
Yeah, so that's a great intro, Ed, and obviously you have the baseball background. But I was watching an E60 story, and this was probably 6 years ago, and Jeremy Schaap was doing the story, and they were going back through the '86 World Series, and all of a sudden they show an interview from Buckner from a local Boston station. It was recorded, but it somehow had been hidden for 9 years. And then so it reemerged when ESPN, found it and showed it in 2012, 2013. But Buckner says, the dream would be to win the World Series, but my real nightmare would be to let the game-winning run score on a ground ball through my legs to cost us the World Series. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, no, like, and Jeremy Schaap wasn't thinking much about it. He was saying prophetic, but he didn't do what we do, Ed. So like you hear it. I'm a big believer in the power of language, and ultimately we track down the clip, and then Mookie Wilson hits the ball, everything that you said, and this is what we know. Saying it didn't make it happen, but it increased the probability by 40 to 70 times that it would happen.
Okay, so do you call that what Buckner did? Everybody, I want you to just get this. This man spoke the ground ball prior to it happening into existence. I have to believe that when pressure hits, we sort of we recoil to what you call like a subconscious plant, correct?
Yes.
I think he's not consciously thinking, I'm going to boot this ground ball, but I think that subconscious plant existed. What is a subconscious plant? What does that mean when you say that?
Yeah, so a subconscious plant is, we have the conscious mind, which is right now, and then we have the subconscious mind, which is operating in our self-talk, at hundreds of words a minute, and it goes, to our memory, and so it's one of those things that if we've said something, a handful of times or over and over again, we've created part of an identity. Right. And an identity is obviously when the neurons sort of fire and wire together. And I know you've had Joe Dispenza on your show who can explain it much more eloquently, but way beyond my IQ. But that identity is formed like, hey, I don't want this to happen. And then as that moment comes, your identity is sort of like, well, this would be good, this would be bad. And so, he in his mind, he's probably remembering, I could win it, but I could also lose it right now. And the negativity is so much more powerful than the positive memory that it drives that.
The good news, everybody, what you're getting out of today's show, there's only steps of what to do. So far, the first half of the show is just eliminating a behavior.
Right. Process of elimination.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about neutral thinking. And by the way, and after we talk about this, I want to talk about your book after this topic comes up.
Sure.
But I want to illustrate it with a story. Start with the story, and then because the behavior is what really drives things. Will you tell them this SAT story for a minute with the guy with the 1400? Because I think facts tell, stories sell. So of all your content, when I've devoured it, some of the stories are what make points for me, right? And so please share this story and then make the point that you would make with it for them. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I think for me, truthfully, just even as a high school teacher, like cutting my teeth in LA Unified School District, and then being raised by my dad, like my dad had thousands of articles of these anecdotal stories, and even to wrap up the negative one, he had a great story about a guy that locked himself on accident in a refrigerated boxcar, starts panicking, because he can't get the attention of anybody else in the boxcar, starts writing down what's going through his mind. Like, I'm in this boxcar, I'm going to freeze to, half asleep now, I can hardly write. And then the guy writes, these may be my last words. It's from Success Unlimited, a magazine in '73. They open up the boxcar many hours later. They find the guy, and he's dead. But then they check the freezing apparatus. It was 56 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
They found out that the freezing apparatus was broken. There was no physical reason for his death. All they could say, as they tried to diagnose it, was somehow he talked himself into dying. Like, this is not a gimmick. Now, it may have taken cancer for me to appreciate it, but I hope it doesn't take people that. And it shouldn't. I'm so embarrassed it took that for me, because my dad, like the coach that he was, the teacher he was, the motivator was, the millions of people that that he inspired. And I love my dad, and we were close. I just was like, nah, I don't buy this. But the SAT in the 80s was scored out of two parts, a math part and a verbal part, both scored out 800 points. Well, people who are not successful, people who are not achieving, people who are about to get kicked out of school, people who are, substance abuse, are typically not expected to do well. Doesn't mean they can't, but they're not expected to do well. But he promises mom he'd take it, so he takes it in May, and then he gets a score back in June, and he scores a 1480 out of 1600, as my dad shares the story. So, so like obviously for people that want a much bigger IQ than I have, and you've been pissed off that you haven't got big words yet in this podcast, it would be called cognitive dissonance, right? Where like what you believe to be true versus what happened are different.
Right.
So
Context, Trevor, I got a 870 on my SATs, and you got a 1010, I think, right? So
I got a 1010, yeah.
So this dude's blown up the score. It's almost 1,500.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So as ultimately he, so he's confounded. His mother confronted him, did what any mom would do. She said, like, did you cheat? Right? She knows her son. He said he tried to cheat, but the Scantrons were, the way the seats were, the number 2 pencil. Right. So, he took the test. So going back into his senior year, he says, man, if I'm smart, I might as well go to class. So he makes a decision based on that score that he'll go to class. Well, that decision, because he starts going to class, he doesn't hang out with people he used to when he didn't go to class. Well, now teachers see him, and they start to treat him differently, and maybe they missed the boat on him. He's in class, he's learning more. Graduates, goes to a community college, goes to a 4-year, and then goes on to the Ivy League, gets an MBA. Well, ultimately changes his life, becomes this incredible magazine entrepreneur. So I'm young, I hear the story, and my dad was telling me all sorts of stories. Man, growing up, I'd be listening to Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and every great speaker you could imagine. So I'm hearing the story, and he said that the guy says, no, that's not the story. So 12 years after all this guy's success, he gets a letter in the mail from Princeton, New Jersey. Now, he doesn't think anything about it. So it turns out the next day his wife said, you're going to open it. He opens it. Well, it turns out the SAT board, which they do every year, will do a standard review of their test taking procedures and policies. The year he took the test, according to my dad, he's one of 13 people, sent the wrong SAT score. His actual score was a 740 out of 1600. And as I heard it, I'm stunned. Wow. And so the guy says, people think the 1480 is what changed my life. But what in truth really changed my life is when I started acting like a 1480. Wow. And what does a 1480 do? He goes to class. Wow. And like what the sports world will tell you is, yeah, they're Cam Newtons that look like GoBots and Transformers and LeBron James, but how do you explain a Russell Wilson? Mm-hmm. And yes, there are Mike Trouts, but how do you explain a Craig Biggio? Right. And I mean, so there's so many like different, and in the business world, of course, there are people that went to Harvard. Of course, there are the Mark Zuckerbergs and all the different people, but how do you explain the thousands of people that didn't go through any traditional education and yet are running our world?
Bro, it's one of the all-time great stories, and there's a couple more maybe we'll get to towards the very end because we're turning the corner on this, but that behavior piece is huge. So far, guys, we're piecing this together. It's don't say stupid things. Try not to think them, and don't say stupid things out loud, number one. 2, your behavior is a predictor of your future. And sometimes behavior can influence thinking, right? 3rd, a huge piece that you teach, and by the way, I wish I knew this earlier, honestly, with a lot of the UFC guys that I've worked with. I wish I had this terminology that I am now going to steal from you, just so you know. So when you hear me,
good. Please.
It's mine. But, and that is the concept of neutral thinking. Mm-hmm. Everyone listen close, because this is something all of you can get to
relatively quickly as well is neutral thinking. What does that mean and how do you do it?
So in '09, probably through '14, I was studying non-negativity. And the best information I could find out about non-negativity was children's books and the elimination of negativity. And, there was Taoism and some other things. But after my last season at Alabama, Kirby Smart, who's the same age as me, got the head coach of Georgia. So it'd be like being at Google and going to another company that's not quite Google,
Yeah.
but getting a chance to be the CEO, and then me leaving Google with a good job to go to him. And I told him, I said, hey, I want to teach it a little bit different, and I want to call some things a little bit different than we've done in the past. Are you cool with that? He said, yeah. And so we really started forming at that point this idea of, well, negative thinking works negative, and positive thinking, it struggles. So let's think of it as a car. If I'm going backwards, I can't go to forwards all at once. I got to go to the middle, and that middle ground is neutral. So the idea of being neutral is ultimately the acceptance of the past as real. And that's where positive thinkers and positive coaches everybody up. And because they want you to pretend that an outcome that you are currently facing or have faced recently, or you haven't been able to get through, if it's a bad one, but let's be honest, the bad ones are lasting a lot longer in your mind than the good ones. That just sucks. That's how we're wired. It's just the truth. So they want you, I went through a divorce. I talked about it in the book. That was like not my choice. I still love her. She's amazing. We're great friends. But there was a lot of people that said, think of all the people now you get to meet. Well, I got married to not meet anybody. I mean, you had your high school sweetheart. I mean, different people have different things, but different people have, I met mine, like love at first sight, airport, all these different things. Well, now it's over. So I had to approach it like, this is real. But I also knew that if I lingered and talked a lot about it, that the negativity would bleed into my future behaviors. So the idea of neutral is, we played a bad half. We had a really bad quarter. We're facing some serious right now in our world. I just lost the love of my life. I'm facing this health challenge. I'm just not performing as well as I want. Whatever it is, that's real. But while the past is real, it's not predictive. What you do next is what determines your future, not how you feel.
Guys, what he's saying, I just want to jump in, is when you got a corner who runs a 4.6 40 and he's covering a dude who runs a 4.3, and you keep telling that dude you can run with this guy, he knows he can't.
Right.
So there's got to be a neutral thinking and a behavior adjustment. I want to make sure they understand.
Right. We film everything, so there's no bullshit.
It doesn't lie.
There's no bullshit, and we got a scoreboard.
Can you give me an example of a neutral statement?
I'll give you just a great one from Apollo 13. So you're 205,000 miles away from Earth, and your secondary ship that's going to land on the moon, or one of them, explodes. So a lot of things are difficult to be positive about at that point. But negative thinking isn't going to work either. So the positive thing might be for Jim, Lovell to tell Buzz Aldrin and Fred Hayes, hey man, just stay with me. We're going to get home. We are finding a way to get home. We are going to get there. And basically what his thing is, all right, what just happened? We had a main bus valve break. Can we still land on the moon? So can we still land on the moon is the ultimate neutral statement. It's not positive. It's not negative. Can we land? No. All right. Okay. We can't land. Can we still, do these two scenarios? No. Can we still orbit the Earth or orbit the moon in this thing? No. All right. So this is our reality. This ship's not going to work. Can we get to the limb, orbit, and circle back? Yes. How would we do that? Okay, we get there. It doesn't have enough oxygen for all of us, so we're going to have a carbon monoxide issue. And every step, and anybody can go on YouTube and watch the Apollo 13 press conference. It's an hour and 26 minutes. It's available for everybody, the real one. And the whole thing is, this is how we did it. And then ultimately what he said is, we just had to find a way to keep going. You know, and so, but I think a neutral statement is through adversity. I take setbacks as temporary. I bounce back quickly.
Very good.
You know,
Very good.
And so, you know, and hey, I got to support myself unconditionally.
Yes.
We're going to find a way through.
I want to go to the negative thinking thing just for a second. I teach a thing called thought stacking. When you begin to think negatively, it's a hyper fast thought stacking process you go through. So you magnify by thought stacking. It's almost impossible to contain one negative thought in your mind and then let it escape you. What you do is you begin to try to validate that thought with more negative thoughts, and typically bigger ones. So that's why that's such a detrimental process to your productivity, your mental well-being, and overall your success. You stack thoughts, everybody. It's a huge thing for you to know. That's why you've got to identify them when they're there and stop the negative thinking process. And especially, as Trevor much more eloquently than I say, saying them out loud. The second thing is when you become a neutral thinker, okay, and that is a baseline place to get. It's not that I don't want you to aspire to be a positive thinking person. I do want you to do that. When you become a neutral thinker, you build some credit with yourself. Let me tell you what happens. When you neutrally think, like if you're in a UFC or you're one of my boxers and you're getting killed by a guy's left hook, neutral thinker says, hey, we got to address the left hook, right? We got to get our right hand up, or whatever that might be. That builds self-trust. If you're a positive thinker going, I don't eat left hooks, I don't eat left hooks, I don't eat left hooks, and the evidence keeps happening to the contrary, you deplete your own self-trust by being a positive thinker in a negative environment. So neutral thinking actually builds self-trust and self-confidence, because what you're telling yourself, you're bearing to be true with evidence repetitively, so that when you do stack a positive thought, you've got some credibility with yourself. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's why neutral thinking is such a valuable asset.
That's one of the things in sports. Nobody cares why you didn't win.
Right.
You know, it's just, you got to find a way to get it done. And so that's why I think sports are such, you know, whether it's the UFC, whether it's, you know, unique, different examples. And to your point about positive thinking, in the absence of negative thinking, positive thinking is a real weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have negative thoughts, what I want you to know is the best athletes in the world, and Ed, you know that whether it's the best athletes, best entrepreneurs, or best business people, everybody has them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because our wiring hasn't changed from 10,000 years ago, where if we weren't assuming the worst, we were going to get stepped on by a dinosaur.
Yes.
You know, and that's the reality. So the book, It Takes What It Takes, you know, with the foreword by Russell Wilson, is really, you know, it proves the power of negativity. So if you're an asshole and you're watching this right now and you want to debate me, you can't not read that and walk away saying, you know what, bullshit, negative thinking is going to make me, or the externalization of negativity, not going neutral, like it's going to make me so much better. If you're succeeding and that's how you've been doing, and you say a bunch of that stuff and you behaving, then you have succeeded in spite of yourself. People who become average because they do average people things. You know, I think people who become successful do successful people things, and people who struggle do struggle people things. And so what happens if I'm a struggle person and I keep doing that? Well, I know the outcome. Hey, I would rather aim high and miss than aim low and hit, and aiming low is not helping. You know, so focus more on a behavior. You know, that's why you know, all these fitness plans don't work. Like, you know, my dad used to talk about playing class reunions, and be 25 years, you see all these people and they look great. You know, and then the class reunion would be in August, and he'd say, you know, I wonder if Ed hasn't eaten since June. You know, because you get back to your class and you want, but that's a short-term sell. You are only affecting your willpower, which will always lose to what you really believe. So after that event, you eat a little bit more, and then you start to go back to who you think you really are. And that's why the identity, which is this is who I am based upon what I do. And where Ed said the neutral comment about athletes can't fake it to themselves, your confidence and your self-esteem is built on what you do, not magical words. And willpower, me coming to speak, a SEAL coming to speak, David Goggins telling you you're or all those things, like that's going to get, I want to change. But if you don't have a plan, then you're going to go back to who you are, not based upon who you're destined to be, but because you think you're a 740. Imagine if you were born, Ed, and you were like, you know what? Every time I've tried walking, all I do is eat it. So I'm just going to chill for a couple of years until I can do what those other people do and walk without any problems. Mm. And that's what I've had to learn in relationships. Like, I did all the Catholic things right. Yeah. But being a husband, so much more than that. Mm. I didn't do what needed to be done for the relationship to exist. And I'm paying the consequences. That does not indict me to not having something better going forward. And if I try and I meet somebody and she's not interested in me, that doesn't mean that I'm doomed for failure. It means that I've got to stay the course and execute the process. And that's what I've learned. And I think the difference, what I've tried to do, and probably the hardest thing for me, Ed, I remember sitting down with Chris Pfaff, drama CEO of Young and Reckless, was like, you got to sell people on your badassness. And so I think it takes what it takes is an exploration of some of the best athletes, some of the best people, and an evolution of how we came to the idea of thinking neutrally. And the great people like Ed Mylett that I've been blessed to have my knowledge raised and get better, because the right attitudes are contagious. Attitudes are contagious in general. That's a neutral statement. Bad or good, but the right attitude is a competitive advantage, and all an attitude is it's just a teeter-totter, man. It's a direction in which you lean. So your audience has got choices to make right now with some real realities that are no shit.
Yeah, Trevor, one of the separators for you is it's real life, real world experience, not theory. And that's why, guys, get the book. I'm just going to tell you straight up. And your vulnerabilities are what make you valuable, bro. If you were doing the Superman thing, I wouldn't connect with you because I'm screwed up too, right? Yeah. So I like dudes that are screwed up that are trying to be less screwed up to be great.
Yeah, I want to be less.
Yeah, me too. And you said something in there that was just, dude, there's so much gold in there. But you said something, I think I quote this correctly, where you said your willpower will eventually succumb to who you believe you are. And Correct. That is powerful, man. Like, it will eventually succumb. Your willpower will. So
not even close. It's not even it's not even close. It's why most New Year's affirmations, or resolutions or affirmations are gone by halftime of the Fiesta Bowl.
I want to know last thing, and we're pressed up on it, but that's just I want to know myself, because I've worked with different guys too, but you've worked with people I haven't worked with that I'm interested in them. So without being personal about them, what does Russell Wilson, Mike Trout, Nick Saban, let's just take those three. So different positions, and one's a coach, one's a quarterback, one's an outfielder. Okay, those three guys, and you've worked with tons. What is different about them? Because there's something different about them that's different amongst the different ones. To get to those levels, everyone's different. Urban Meyer's a dear friend of mine. Lou Holtz has become a pretty good buddy. Like, there's something different about those few people that's different amongst the difference. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. What do you think it is, or what do you know it is?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned, Lou Holtz, because you talk about somebody that doesn't have traditional aptitude. And I remember being 1997, finishing college in Pasadena, California. He came to speak. I was able to get my dad to pay $1,000 to go see him. Great. And one of the things that he would talk about, because there wasn't a lot of digital content available, was this idea that he didn't let members on his team quit. Once the season started, you had to play the whole season. You could quit at the end of the year, but like, that was clear. And he said by doing that, players woke up every day not deciding if they wanted to be a part of the team. That was already decided, right? So that would help me, where any job I take, I'm going to make a 2-year commitment. That's what my dad believed. So if I worked for a full-time company, My goal is to commit 2 years because I need to know, obviously, unless they don't commit to me, but I need to have a better understanding of who they are and what they're about. So when I, went to Exos, I was there 2 years to the day. When I went to IMG, I was there, 12 years, but that 2 year commitment, when I went to teach, I taught 2 years at the first school, 2 years at the second year. So that was from Lou Holtz. But this is what I would say, and I know as we close, why is Nick Saban, this guy who worked at his dad's gas station from, Monaga, West Virginia, one of Forbes' best leaders in the world. And I know so many people like, why should a football coach be one of the best leaders in the world? We don't get to decide those things. Other people make those decisions. But his message is universal. And if you don't believe it, you see who was more impactful during an F5 hurricane in the state of Alabama, Nick Saban and his players, or the governmental officials of Alabama. So what I would say about Nick is an incredible understanding of where he's good and where he can get better. And he supplements all the areas. He's not afraid to reach out to tons of different people, tons of speakers, a lot smarter than me, whether they're in substance abuse, motivation, education, inspiration, business, and then a handful of those people get a chance to consult on a more frequent basis for me, which was 25 to 30 days a year, and then play a deeper role weekly with him. So his understanding of, you don't need to be sick to get better. Yeah, I'm really good. And he's got a great system. And he's so good at what makes football players good, like coaches good, how he recruits, his architecture, it's not a BS positive message. So he's going to give a talk for 10 minutes. He prepares for 2 hours because he learned when he met one of the presidents of the United States that he saw that level of preparation of the president of the United States and said, why should it be any different for a coach? Now, I think Mike Trout, so for me, my relationship was with Billy Epler and the coaches. I got to consult, 30, 40 days with the team and spend, probably a lot more time with some than with others. But I got to spend a lot of time watching Mike Trout, and because Mike Trout is, you talk about like great to greater.
Yep.
So, Mike Trout, and so what I saw in Mike was the humility was incredible. The athleticism was obviously exceptional, and incredible. The grit and grind, he was making $30 million a year and still going home and living with his family. How he managed adversity, his adversity tolerance, when they, and I'm sure he handled it well with Tyler Skaggs last year. For those down in Orange County, and I love Tyler and his family. But I think Mike has an incredible process, and he trusts. What I saw was he trusts his process. He's not looking for gimmicks. One of the things that pisses me off the most is when somebody says, I read your book, what can I read next? Just follow the book. I hate serial readers. I think what Mike is he has a really good process. He trusts it. Doesn't vary, but he's open-minded and he'll listen, but he's not looking for gimmicks.
Okay.
And in baseball, it's not about getting rid of the slump. It's happening. It's how you minimize the length of it.
Yep.
That's the difference. Yep. You minimize yours to four games versus 14 games, because 4 games, they can ride through with you. 14 games, man, they got to get something done.
Yeah.
So, and then I would say Russell's just the most incredible collection of world-class behaviors. He just does everything how he talks out loud. If you're negative, you can't live in his life. There's no room for you. There's no negative news on TV. They'll watch Netflix, they'll watch other things, listens to uplifting spiritual music. Yeah, he's not afraid of rap. He's not going to plug his ears or whatever. But the time he gets up, the nutritionist, his active release therapist, his massage therapist, his understanding of his body's physiology, and understanding of sleep hygiene and fatigue science. He has a great understanding of how that works for him. And then if you listen to Russell talk, if you go on the podcast we did with Zillow or some of the other things that we've done, this guy knows more than me, you know, because he lives it. He understands neutral thinking, the minimization of negativity. And that's what got him through an interception at the 1 yard line with 124 million people watching, which was 11 million people more than that watched MASH's finale. For you young people, you may not know, but that was the most popular show. That 124 million people that watched him throw an interception was the most televised event in the history of our country. And he made that mistake, and we got through it neutrally. It was real. Evaluated what happened, what was the decision, feet placement, arm throw, all the different things, routes. This is real. And then we went down to Rancho Santa Fe. The book goes into this in depth about how we navigated it. We got what was in our control, a great off season. You know, that was all we could control. We got a really good trainer. We had a great off season, did all the things that you need to do, followed his goals, which was to run at the 4.4 level. He had run in the low 4.5s. That was an aspirational goal. We shot for that. We built everything around speed, so he wasn't getting caught from the back end. And then every morning we watched one of his fourth quarters going all the way back to his 9th grade year while he'd have breakfast. If you want to stay where you're at, stay. Like, it's okay. Like, this is where I'm like, this is why I aspire to spend my time with people who are already really good. We need to be neutral in our language. We need to be radical in our candor with ourselves.